So I believe that people who have joined today's program would be having some basic knowledge about qualitative research, of course. So I'm supposed to talk about qualitative data analysis, of course, within a very short period, like an hour. We won't be able to talk about everything, assuming that you got this basic knowledge about what is qualitative research and nature of the qualitative research, what is the purpose of carrying out qualitative research. So with that, we will move to understand what is the qualitative data analysis process. So when it comes to qualitative data analysis, of course, many of the people believe that it is the same process that we apply in quantitative research, that it is the same thing that we are doing in qualitative research as well. Of course, it is not. We have to come out of that school of thinking, because when you take quantitative research, analysis part becomes quite easier because you have many data analysis packages. And then, of course, there are numbers. So it's just about you that you enter, those numbers into your system, the package that you are using. And you can just run the right statistical tool in your program. And then if you know how to interpret those results that you get after carrying out those statistical tools, then you're fine. But here, when it comes to qualitative data analysis, also, although we have softwares, like most commonly we use NVO, and there are some other qualitative data analysis packages as well. But of course, although they are available, it cannot do the job that the quantitative data analysis packages are doing for us. It's mainly relying on the researcher. The qualitative data analysis packages are actually helping us to organize our data, right? Because we have lots of data, bulk of data, we are conducting interviews, we have recordings and everything. And then we need to, like when you're handling this qualitative data, it will be a little difficult when you're doing it manually. You might miss certain insights that is originally coming from your data, because it's lots of data. So for that purpose, for you to make it quite convenient for you to handle that data, of course, qualitative data analysis packages would help. So otherwise, it will not do a job like the quantitative data analysis packages do for you. Right. Right. Okay. So then I'll move to the topic, of course. I will basically explain to you the scope of today's session will be actually to understand. I will just quickly take you through qualitative data collection techniques, just to make you sure that what sort of data that you will be dealing with. And then I'm going to explain you the process, right? What is the process that we have to follow? Because either you plan to do this manually or with the software, you need to know the process, right? Because for you to operate the software, for you to follow the steps in the software, also you need to understand the process manually. This is the steps that you have to follow. So when you really do not know that, even with the software, you wouldn't be able to do that, right? So let me then start with explaining the nature of the research questions that you will have. Let me have 1 second, please. I'll just control the noise around. Please give me a second. All right. Sorry about that, because I'm at the office. Okay. So then when you look at the research questions, the nature of the research questions that we have for qualitative research. Now, usually when you're doing qualitative research, your research question should be how and why questions. Because if you look at the nature of the qualitative research, we are going to understand a particular phenomenon in depth. Right? So if you want to understand something in depth, you definitely have to look at the picture behind the numbers. Now, when it comes to quantitative research, it will give you a number, right? Now, you are circulating that questionnaire among a selected sample, and they will tick a number on your Likert scale, and it's just a number. But more than knowing the number, I think when you're going in depth of that, it is quite worthwhile that we understand the story behind it. Actually, what had been the reason for them to give that number, right? When you're making decisions, now why we are doing research is basically for decision making, right? So when you're making decisions, more than a number, when you can see the picture behind that as well, you'll be able to make valid conclusions and to make effective decisions. So that's the purpose of qualitative research. You have to select a particular phenomenon, particular research problem, and our purpose is to go in depth of it. So therefore, usually we are actually trying to address the research questions that are starting with how, when, why, right? So therefore, if you're doing qualitative research, and when you're writing qualitative research questions, of course, the correct way of writing them is actually using how, when, why, nature of questions. So therefore, now when you take how, now if you ask a question, if one of your research questions, these are not the questions that you get in your interview guide, but when you're formulating your research questions, you have to start them with how, when, why questions. It doesn't mean that there cannot be what type of questions that you usually get in quantitative research. They can also be there, but if you let's say that you have about 3 research questions for your research project, and all of them are what type of research questions, of course, it does not look like a proper research, proper qualitative research, because if you look at the research paradigms, research philosophies also, your approach, whether it's a positivism approach or whether it is another approach that is coming under qualitative research. So that also reflects through the wording of your research questions. What exactly this research is, whether it is a qualitative research coming from, stemming from which type of research philosophy. So all will be reflected throughout the research process. So therefore, when you are writing your research questions in qualitative research, they have to be how and why questions as well. And every research, now it can be quantitative or qualitative. When you are carrying out your research, the purpose of carrying out a research is, once you have formulated your research questions, you'll have to find out the answers. Okay, so that is now once you're satisfied with the answers that you have achieved after conducting your research, you can see you can actually present your findings through a presentation or as a publication or whatever it is. So then, since we really want to understand or find out the answers for our research questions, that is why we are doing our research. So we know that the research questions are the broken down elements of the broader research problem. So once you have identified the research problem, and when you have identified the smaller components of the same thing, you are formulating research questions. So when you answer the research questions, automatically you will address your research problem as well. So therefore, when in qualitative research, when you answer your research questions, since your research questions have been formulated with how and why questions, of course, if it is a how type of a question, you will have to explain it, right? Because when you say how you did that, so basically it refers to a process of doing something. When you say how, and when you say why, you will have to explain the reasons behind something. So then therefore you can see that the answers for your research questions, if it is a qualitative research, they are very descriptive in nature. All right. So then this particular process therefore is called, of course, I'll tell you the technique. Now, since the purpose of carrying out a research is to find out the answers for your research questions, and then in qualitative research, since research questions are starting with how and why, and following the nature of those research questions, since the answers should be very descriptive in nature, we are supposed to carry out a data analysis technique called thematic analysis. All of us, maybe we know that usually when you are dealing with primary data in qualitative research, the analysis that we commonly do is called thematic analysis. And remember, the themes are the answers for these research questions. Okay, because your purpose is to answer the research questions. You have formulated research questions at the very beginning of your research. Now you know them, what your research questions are. Then you are collecting data, you are analyzing data to find out the answers for these research questions. And those answers are called themes. They are actually themes. Now, for example, if you have a how type of a question, when you say how, someone might be explaining a way of doing something or what they have done. So those tips or the things that they have done can be the answers for this particular research question, and they are your themes. Of course, when you have a research question that is starting with why, so then of course, when you say why, you are coming up with reasons behind something. And those reasons will be the themes for that research question. So therefore, thematic analysis is actually the probable answers, or the themes are the probable answers for your research questions. So since analysis is about finding the answers or or generating the themes, which are the probable answers for the research questions, that technique is identified as thematic analysis. Right? I hope it is quite clear for you now why we call it thematic analysis, of course, and what the themes are. So how would what would you actually analyze in qualitative research? These are the main qualitative data collection techniques that we use in our research. Basically, we conduct interviews. Interviews can be, different types of interviews are there. There can be semi-structured interviews and unstructured interviews. Of course, we know we take a group at once and we are carrying out focus group interviews, right? And then, of course, we are collecting data as documents and pictures. So it's not always the interviews can be data, the only type of data that you're using for qualitative analysis. That can be main type of data collection method. Along with interviews, we may use documents that are related to your research issue. And of course, any pictures that will tell you a story about the research phenomenon that you are studying about. And of course, observation. Right? You are supposed to observe the behavior of a certain group of people who are relevant to your research study, and it can be overt and covert. Now, overt is when the observees know that they are being observed, and the covert is that they are not. They are called disguised observation as well, because they do not know that they are being observed. So which one is to be utilized, to be employed for your research would be depending upon the nature of the severity of your research problem, or how sensitive your research problem and all. That will depend on nature of your research problem. But we have the choice of overt and covert observation, and you observe. When you observe a behavior of a certain group of people or a certain individual, of course, you will have to take your observational notes. Otherwise, what you have observed, you will forget it soon. So before you forget, while you are observing, then you're supposed to take down your observation notes, and that's what you're going to use for subsequent data analysis, right? So you have documents and interviews, observational notes, so these are the data collection methods mainly that we are using in qualitative research. And then you will use data for you to conduct interviews. You will use an interview guide, right? Remember, when you say an interview guide, it is actually not that you are going to type exact questions that you're going to ask from the interviewees or the participants. If you know it is, of course, you don't have to go for a qualitative research. I think you know the basics of qualitative research. So one of the reasons why basically we are forced to go for a qualitative research is whenever you do not have enough existing literature for you to design it as a quantitative research. So then you may need to find out what is missing in the literature through a qualitative research. So that could be one of the main reasons why we have to go for qualitative research. So therefore, we wouldn't be able to write down every question as it is that you're going to ask, but you can have a guide. A guide, right? So when you say a guide, they can be like, certain bullet points, just to make sure that you're not going to miss anything out while you're carrying out your interviews. And for you to develop your interview guide properly, just to ensure that you are exactly asking the questions from your participants that are related to your research problem. What you can do is you can refer the little literature that you have, right? Because I told you, usually when you are going for qualitative research, not having enough literature would have been a reason for you to go for a qualitative research. So therefore, whatever that is available, past literature, the little literature support that you have, and also since you do not have many literature, usually we are relying on theory when you're carrying out qualitative research. Just because you cannot get enough literature for you to design and to get the right direction of your research, we use theories quite commonly more than in a qualitative research. Theories are playing a quite significant role. So you can get the help of theory, you can get the help of little literature that you have. And also if you are an experienced person in the same industry that you have chosen for your research, you can use your own knowledge, which is not, of course, allowed in quantitative research, but in qualitative research, yes, you can, because we consider the research as a part of the research. So those are the differences between the different research paradigms that you have. Qualitative research, we acknowledge that the researcher is part of the research, so that is accepted. But in quantitative, yes, it is not accepted, because that is the quantitative research paradigm, and this is the qualitative research paradigm. Yes, so then you can develop the initial thoughts, what actually you're going to ask from the interviewees, your participants. Will be depending on those things. You'll get the support from theory, some literature that you have, and with your knowledge, right? So, as you're conducting your interviews, of course, since this is usually these are semi-structured interviews, sometimes they are unstructured, depending on the research design you use. So today I'm not going to discuss that, but there are different research designs in qualitative research. Depending on that, whether you're going to conduct semi-structured interviews or unstructured interviews, that will depend on that. So whatever it is, when you know what actually you're going to ask, and then when you ask them, they will give the answer, and then based on those answers, you can again ask cross questions, which is very important in qualitative research, because you're going to explore a phenomenon that is not very well known to you, and also which is not very well researched, because that was one of the reasons for us to go for qualitative research. So we know only little, and as you collect data, analyze them and all, you will gradually explore the phenomenon. So therefore, your interview guide was prepared based on what you know and what other people have discussed in the existing literature, and what kind of theories that are supporting to you. But there can be many that are not known to you yet. So that's why you'll have to ask cross questions to understand the nature of the phenomenon, right? So that is very important in quantitative research. However, so this is how you are collecting data for your research. And what I want to highlight here is, so once you have collected data from those techniques, of course, this is what you will have. So this is therefore the nature of qualitative data. They can be explanations, for reasons for something. They are ideas. It depends on the nature of their research problem. And their opinions. Of course, you have taken the pictures. Now I'll tell you how you're going to analyze pictures. You must be wondering how actually we can analyze the pictures. Of course, we can. And the notes taken, maybe when you're observing your participants, their behavior, the notes that you have taken, and then if you have collected any images that are relevant to your research problem, and your interview data, once you have, because we know usually we are recording our interviews, because with the permission of the respondent, of course, we'll have to get the permission first, and then you can get them recorded, because you cannot remember everything. Even if you're going to take the notes, you might miss certain important points, and you will not be able to focus on the conversation very clearly, which would avoid, asking the right cross questions when you cannot focus on the interviews, because when you have to take down notes, you might lose your focus. So therefore, it is always better that you get the permission to record that data, record the interview, and then you can leisurely focus on the interview that you are carrying out at that moment. So therefore, this is the nature of qualitative data. This is what you are going to analyze. Okay, so you can see probably now even if you take a picture, right? Pictures are actually, because all the pictures giving you a certain message. Now, when you have taken picture, let's say now we are going to, now since I'm coming from business management discipline, so whenever we have to go and observe, let's say a certain, employee behavior, something like that. And then if I have taken the permission to observe a board meeting of a particular company, with their permission, I can take some pictures that are relevant to, that I believe that this would be, would be some evidence for my research. You can take the pictures and then of course you can observe their conversation style, whether they are collaborative or, what kind of conversations are going on. So I should take my notes while I'm observing that. I have to take my notes, and even if I take a picture, that picture will tell you a story. So what actually that picture means to you should be written, right? Otherwise, pictures themselves will not speak for the speaker unless you explain and describe by clearly identifying what message that it gives to you. What part of it is relevant to you. So that has to be written, and that is what you are going to subsequently use for data analysis. So therefore, even images, the same thing. So you can now understand that. So finally, what you're analyzing is words. So that is what you're going to analyze. Even it is a picture or image or whatever it is, you're going to convert into an idea, what that picture tells you, what that image tells you, So then you're trying to, so finally, you'll have like lots of like a huge, like a load of data, a lot of course, they are coming as words. So that is what you are going to finally analyze in your qualitative data analysis process. Okay, right. So I will now explain to you the particular process. Now, when it comes to qualitative data analysis frameworks, there are a few in the literature that's been discussed. This is actually Miles and Huberman framework. There are like Brown and Clark, later on like Brown and Clark method of data analysis process was quite popularized. But however, I would say, even if you look at them, I don't personally see a big difference between the processes that they're explaining, because it's basically more or less the same, although different people have come up with different frameworks of quantitative data analysis. Still, you are finding themes, which are the probable answers for your research questions through the data that you have collected. In that scenario, in that case, the role of the researcher, right? The role that the researcher has to play is significant, because softwares cannot do anything. Softwares alone cannot do anything for you. They cannot analyze data for you. It will only help you to organize your data. It will only help you to understand and spot something that is missing, because when you're doing it manually, sometimes you might not see a particular trend, but when you're using a software that will support to understand what is missing and certain trends, right? And also it will help you to handle that bulk of data. So that sort of a support can be taken from a software, but otherwise, interpretation of data is entirely up to the researcher, because qualitative data analysis is all about how you interpret that. Now, when you say interpreting, it's not just reporting what they have told you. Most of the people believe when it comes to qualitative data analysis, it's just about, just to listen to the interviews, right? Which has been the most common data collection technique. People believe that, all right, so you are supposed to carry out certain interviews, record them. You know what is transcribing, right? So we are transcribing it. You're listening to the interviews, and then you're writing them one by one, and you're bringing it to a particular document. So that can be called interview transcription. The process is transcribing process. Once you have done it, the particular document that you will have, that can be called interview transcription. And by collecting these interview transcriptions and to repeat it in the same way, so that is actually not qualitative data analysis. That is just to report what they have told you, but that is not accepted, right? You will have to interpret data interpretation is the most important part and what you must do in qualitative data analysis. Right, so with that in our mind, let's look at these processes that Miles and Huberman have suggested. They're quite pioneering, instrumental in like bringing out or to talk about a particular process that you can follow. And also in qualitative research, also we talk about reliability and validity. Of course, if you look at these two terms, they are coming from positivism paradigm. When you see reliability, validity, those are actually positivism terms. So so Miles and Huberman, and also Lincoln and Guba, who are quite well-known qualitative researchers, scholars, they were quite opposed, like using these quantitative terminologies in qualitative research. So they were like introducing something called trustworthiness of data, quality of data. So they are the right terms that you have to use when you're doing qualitative research. So I'll come to that later on. So before that, let me explain this particular process. So this is, I'm repeating. So this is Miles and Huberman, right? So they are the ones who have presented this particular framework of data analysis. Right, so I'll start from the first step. Now before that, of course, just have a careful look, a close look of this particular diagram. Now, usually if it is a process, you would be able to see process number 1, 2, 3, 4 like that. And also you should also would be able to see that you do something first and you're going to the second one and then straight on. There shouldn't be a process that should be coming back. Right now in this particular diagram, you can see that they are not actually single-sided arrows. They are both-sided. Some of the arrows you can see going back and forth. Many arrows are like that. And even, once you have gone to the, let's say now, if it is the first process, if this is a second thing to do, if this is a third thing to do, and if this is the last thing to do, but then again, once you're at the final stages also, you can see that it is not going to be ending like this. You're coming back to the beginning, and then you can go there again and, so it goes like that. So it's not a process that you have to do one after the other, and it is never a process that you're it is not a process that you're never coming back as well, right? So you can see, if you look at this particular process, this is a very flexible process. And remember, this is something that is going in your head, right? This is a mental process that you do, right? Because you will actually do this in your head, and finally, you will be able to see your themes. But of course, you will see the evidences for your themes. But this is a mental process. That's what I told you. Interpretation, the role of the researcher in the analysis process is huge, right? Unlike in quantitative research, because in quantitative research, you just enter the numbers. I'm not actually I'm telling you, it's quite easier to do that. That's why most of the people are, they're fond of doing quantitative research, because data collection process seems to be a little easier than, meeting people and conducting interviews. So it's just about circulating your questionnaire. You'll get quantitative data, and you can easily input it, and you don't have to worry about who the person the analysis is carried out by, because who does it, it's the software. It's a number. So even I enter that number, it is number 3. Even another person enter the number, that is number 3. So finally, the results will also be the same, irrespective of the person who is carrying out the data analysis process. But here, it is not the case. It is highly depending on who the person data analysis process is carried out by. It is highly depending on the person. So here, therefore, we call it actually in qualitative data analysis, or in carrying out qualitative data research, it is recommended that the researcher must do everything, right? Most of the people try to outsource the interviewing process, which is not good to do. Why? Because when you are conducting those interviews by yourself, you will be getting very much familiar with that data, right? Because I told you, it's just about knowing your data. handling your own rat. That's how the qualitative data and the people, the scholars have explained that in the literature, handling your own rat. It is your own data. They are your own data. So you definitely got to know what they are about. The softwares cannot do wonders for, qualitative data analysis. It's always you who is going to identify what they have told you and what they are about and what message, it gives to you. So that's called interpreting data. Interpretation cannot be done when you really do not know the in and out of it. Right? So that's the whole idea behind that process is you are the one who have gone through the literature, and you are the one who have conducted the interviews. You are the one who have listened to the interviews many times. You're the one who have transcribed the interviews, and therefore now you're very much familiar about your own data, which will be facilitating your data analysis process rather than a person who's trying to analyze something that you do not know. Okay, so it is impossible. So therefore, don't try to outsource your data analysis process to someone else. Do it by yourself. Otherwise, the person that you are outsourcing it does not know as much as you know of your own data. Right? So then we know that we already talked about, we'll start from here. I wouldn't say that, yeah, of course, this is the first thing that you're doing, but data display, data collection, data reduction, you can say it can happen at the same time. So I can't say this is the first thing, yes, that we do, but I can also say this is the second, this is the second, this is the third, this is the last one, of course, but that will be depending on the researcher themselves, right? Why? Because it's up to me to do that. It is very flexible, versatile process. You can always go forward, come back, come backward. You can see depending on the looking at the direction of the arrows, right? So if you start from here, which is your data collection process, right? So you have collected data, and then these were the methods that we use to collect data, right? And we know that we have words with us, right? Pictures and everything we are converting to words. So now we have them with us. One thing I forgot to tell you, when you are starting or when you're doing your data analysis process, the other thing that you have to decide is you have to take a decision, you have to make a decision. Are you going to analyze your data using the software or manually? That has to be decided first, because now all these things, these are the types of data that we have. If you're using the software, right, any kind of a software, you'll have to have soft copies of these data types, soft copies of these things. Otherwise, you'll have to have everything in hard copies. Okay. Explanations, opinions, whatever they are, they can come. They will be included in your interview transcription. So you have to transcribe it, and you have to take the printouts of them. And images also, you can have the printouts, copies, or whatever they are. You can, you can write what those images and the pictures would tell you. You'll have to write them on the picture. So it's up to you to find out the way that you're going to handle it. So that's the first thing that you have to decide. And then when you have your, soft copies or hard copies or whatever, depending on the way that you are going to carry out your analysis, then if you go here, right, let's say data display. Data display is to, to convert your data for maybe to to tables, to organize this data into tables or graphs, or to convert them to a format that you can easily identify your data. So displaying, right? So rather than that everything is coming in words, if you can convert, if you can, do some charts or pictures or bars using those data, that will be quite useful. It will be quite easier for you to interpret them. Right? Okay, so, and also, rather you are having them as basically when it comes to interviews, rather you are having them as recordings, better you have them as transcriptions, because when you can see them, of course, when you can see them, you will be able to easily capture them. The idea can easily be captured when you can see the data, right? Rather you're listening to them, when you can get them to pages as a document, you can go through that and it can be easily identified and interpreted. Pushpamal, I think if the background noise is disturbing a lot, or can I change my location?
I think it's not.
Is it disturbing a lot?
No, not that. I know that the surrounding.
Right. So as I told you, more than listening to the recordings, when you can get them into documents that you can see, you can actually easily grab them. Okay, you can easily interpret them. At the same time, when you can actually organize them into, now, of course, when you're using software, you can do this. Like you can, now I told you that is about developing themes. That is about developing themes, and themes are the probable answers for your research questions. So finally, you are developing your themes based on the support of the data that you have collected, right? Now, when you are identifying a reason for something, let's say reason number 1. So for you to identify it as a reason, there should be many data or many evidences that should be coming from your own data for you to identify as a reason. Now, for example, let's say that we are conducting a research about understanding why we have, let's say now, okay, we have joined the webinar today. So if someone asks from you why you have joined the webinar today, we've got 10 to 15 people. And when the same reason is repeated, that is a case, that is for us to identify the reasons, because that can be taken as a reason when the same reason has been repeated by many people. So when I have identified those number of responses, of course, I can actually present it in a graph or table. So that is actually called data display. You can manually do that as well, but when you're using a software, it can easily be done. So data can be displayed by using graphs, tables. Also, I must say, it is always better to convert your data that you can see, right? More than some people actually try to analyze your recordings by listening to it without transcribing. So that is actually not that effective, because like when the documents, when the printouts are there, it is easy for you to refer and read it again and again. Okay, so that stage is actually data display. And I would now come to this one, which is data reduction. Now the data reduction is, now as I told you, data reduction is to just to select certain data that are highly compelling, highly supporting your findings. Now, for example, when you take your interview transcription, when you are like developing, formulating themes, you are actually getting the support from some significant data chunks. which we call quoting, right? Or also you actually quote a certain component of your, it could be from your interview transcription, or it could be from the notes that you have taken from the observation, or it could be from the note that you have written based on the ideas that have that pictures or the images have given to you. So you're writing a certain, like explanation description on those pictures, images, and you have your interview transcriptions, and a few data chunks, some data or some few sentences are actually like sticking out more significantly to support the theme that you're going to identify. Okay, now as I told you, if you are asked why you have joined today's program, now when we are trying to analyze those responses, we are not going to actually code, or the technical term is coding, right? I'm not going to code entire interview, right? But entire interview had helped me to get that overall understanding, but to come up with those themes, right? Or it can be sometimes reasons, or it can be sometimes process, or it can be sometimes attributes of something, it can be someone's experience, whatever it is that you're doing research about, that those themes, everyone's themes can be different based on the research that you do, for what type of research questions that you're looking for, what type of answers that you're looking for, the questions that you have developed. So then that entire understanding is actually coming from the overall process, like that you have met those people, you have talked to them, and so entire process, entire interviews, entire data collection process had helped you to get that overall understanding, and that experience, that exposure that you had would have helped you to interpret your data. Okay, so that is coming from the overall picture. But for the reader to understand why this is a theme, for that you are actually selecting much more important, much more critical few points that we call coding, right? So you bring them in and you code them to show, okay, so this is theme, this is a probable answer for this particular research question, and these are the evidences for that. That is called coding. Okay, so therefore you are not going to quote the entire interview transcription, entire document, but few compelling, few very important quotations will be selected. That is called coding, and the rest of the data will be reduced. You are not going to, although you have done long interviews, you are not going to show the entire interview. You are not going to quote for one theme. Right? So you're coding few important statements, important few sentences that the reader would see, all right, why this is a theme? All right, many people have talked about the same thing, and these are the evidences for that. So that is called coding, and that is where data reduction is happening. You're reducing data. Okay, you're reducing data, you're confining yourself for the main, compelling data chunks, but it doesn't mean that other data have not been helpful. That is what it had helped you to get the overall understanding and interpreting of that, because you're never going to identify things just based on that few quotations. You are just bringing them in, others to see why that is a theme. Otherwise, entire, interpretation would have come from the overall process. Okay, so that process is called data reduction. So sometimes at the data collection process itself, because I told you now, since you are the person who is doing this rigorously, you already have a very good understanding by the time you are that you're ready to analyze your data. So therefore you can, before you're going there, you can straight away reduce data certain times. Okay, or otherwise you can go there and come to data reduction. So it doesn't matter. It is up to you, as long as the final result is verified and as they are coming from data itself. It can be anything, someone can go there, or someone can collect data and do it and then come to do data reduction, or else some other person can, do data collection and then straight away go to data display. That doesn't matter. And even if you look at this particular arrow, you can see after data display, you can come to data reduction, or after data reduction, you can go to data display. All right, it can happen either way, right? And then once data reduction, or once you have coded your data, right? So when you have coded, now you can see now in that can be easily done. You have few themes. So under each theme, theme identification is also there are many strategies that you can identify themes. So most commonly we call them a priority-based coding and in vivo coding. Right, priority-based coding is sometimes some people call it deductive coding, that is coming from literature. Right now, when you have gone through literature, when other people have done similar research, you may already know certain, if it is a Y type of a question, then you know the reasons because other people have also conducted similar research. But now you're going to test whether they are the same reasons in this particular context as well by conducting interviews. So in your interview guides, of course, you'll have to I'll actually answer the questions at the end. I can see that's a certain few questions are there. I'll answer them at the end. Right. So what I have been telling you is, yes, now when these themes have identified, so themes should be supported by the evidence. Okay, so that is called coding. And once coding is done, you are then going to make the conclusions. Okay, so based on the themes that you will conclude. And as I told you, there are different methods of doing coding. We usually call it coding strategy. Coding strategy would be, certain codes can be coming from literature and certain codes can be coming from your own data. And these codings actually are the most important ones that are contributing to theoretical knowledge because they have not been discussed in the literature before. So these are your original findings. Okay, so if you have found any themes based on those based on that strategy, which is called in vivo coding, or sometimes we call it indigenous coding. They are the most important one. That is the most important theoretical contribution that you are doing through your research because other things have already been found by other people in the literature. You can see them, but whatever that is coming from your original data collection, from your own data, will be very useful. So basically in a qualitative research, when it comes to thematic analysis, basically it can be a combination of priority-based coding or the deductive coding and inductive coding. Inductive coding is the coding codes that are deriving, that are emerging from your own data. Okay, right. Yeah, so then you do your coding here, and that is where you reduce data and you are restricted to certain important data chunks for others to see why they have been selected as themes. And finally, you are coming to make the conclusions based on your thematic analysis that you have done. Okay. And once you're here also, sometimes when you are not very happy about what you have concluded, and when you see that something is missing or something is wrong, or if anything is highly contracted with what other people have found before, you can always go back to your data collection and see whether that you are, that anything is missing here, or whether that you have not actually transcribed an interview, or whether you have not interpreted it correctly. So you can always go back to the beginning. So there isn't any restriction that you cannot go back to the beginning, right? And here also you can see after data display, if you want, you can make the conclusions without going here, because since when you're very much familiar about the data that you have collected, you may already know what your themes are by the time that you are ready to do this. So you can make conclusions, right? And then you can again go for data reduction. So that's up to you. So you can see it's a very flexible, versatile process. There isn't any hard and fast rule that you do this thing first. Of course, you have to collect data first of all, but after that, what you're going to do is entirely up to you based on your convenience, but you have to ensure that you're finally ending up with the right conclusion. For that, you can follow your own way. You can always, sift between these processes as you wish. right? So that is basically the qualitative data analysis process. If you do it manually, yes, even if you do it by using the software, these are the steps that you have to follow. It doesn't matter whether you do it manually or using the software, but this is the process that you have to follow. If I explain you that in quite brief sense, this is basically what we do. So the same thing, I have like taken them to slides. As I told you, the familiarity of the researcher of your own data is very important. So therefore, this is how you are preparing for data analysis. You prepare your data. So you do your interviews, record them. And usually while you are conducting your interviews also, it is recommended that you do your first interview, you transcribe it, you listen to it many times before you're going to do the second interview, because it will, your second interview will be very effective because you know already the situation very well. So you will be more effective in answering the right question at the next interview. So when you do the next one also, you listen to it many times before you're going to the third interview. Right, so that is usually what you have to do. So then you know everything about your data that you have collected, even you have gone through very rigorously through your literature as well. So once you have done your interviewing process, you have to transcribe it word to word. And then you can, after that also, you can read your into transcription many times, because, you without going through the documents, you should be able to identify your themes, because everything must be in your head like that. Yes. Okay, so there are two questions that have come up. I'll just, since it is relevant to this part. So one is about our themes. Are themes also called concepts? Yeah, it doesn't matter. I mean, when you say concept, that is a broad concept, right? Now, of course, it can be like this. Now, when we are, there's a concept called coding level. I'll come to that now. This Terence Rodriguez, there's a question, so I'll come to that later. In my second slide, I think I have the answer for your question. Please bear with me. I'll answer this question. There's another question coming from Chatushka. Any minimum number of questions be included in the questionnaire? It is not like that, right? There isn't any hard and fast. That's why I told you qualitative research is very flexible, but practically, if you're using very long, like, I mean, if it is a very long interview, people wouldn't be very happy to participate in the long interviews like that. Now, usually when we are conducting interviews, what it says is maximum about hour or 1.5 hour interviews would be fine. People would be able to devote their time and concentrate on for such a duration. But when it goes more than that, of course, you better stop your interview and getting another appointment to come and meet the same person later day. Right. So therefore, when you're trying to ask so many questions, because it's not, of course, their research, it's our research. So they really do not, they are not that interested as like us, since it is our own research. Of course, we have that enthusiasm, commitment, everything, because we need to get this done. But your respondent, your participant who is giving information wouldn't be that, that enthusiastic like you. So therefore, better you do not go for many questions, but you should be able to strategically handle it. At the same time, you'll have to ensure that you have collected everything that you want as well. So in that case, whenever one interview is not going to be from one person, like let's say that you have taken about more than nearly 2 hours, then better you stop it, because it's not going to be effective towards the end of the interview, because many people would not want to, spend that much of time for an interview. So better you stop it and come another day if you have so many other questions to be asked. Otherwise, there isn't any restrictions in terms of number of questions, as long as you know that they are highly important for you to get the data, that you want. Okay. Right. So then coming back to this, yes. So better you read your into transcriptions as many as times that you can, because it'll again, everything that is in the document will be in your head. Then it should be very easy for you to do your data analysis. Right. So this I already explained to you. this is called coding strategy or identifying codes. So a priori codes that are deriving from literature, and in vivo codes are coming from your own data. So it's like magic is a phrase that could come, that could form the basis of a code category, right? So it is actually coming unexpectedly from your own data, which you could not see in the literature that you have read, okay? So when you have like carefully selected and read your literature, if anything that you have now come up with from your own data was not visible in the literature, so that is going to be highly important original contribution from your research to the existing body of knowledge. So these are very important, of course, because the purpose of qualitative research is to, of course, we know that it's called inductive approach, because we are trying to create new knowledge rather than testing the existing body of knowledge like we do in quantitative research, which is a deductive approach. Yeah. And talking about the concept which the previous question was about, it can be like this now. Now, if there are concepts, of course, the concepts are at a broader level, right? Now, when you're doing coding, now I told you that coding is, now whenever you have come up with a probable answer for your research questions, you have to gather evidence from all the interviews that you have done and the explanation from the pictures, images, documents, if you have collected, right? From everything, whatever those evidences must be, like pulling them in and organizing them at one place. And you have to show you have to now show the theme that you have identified, and from where this theme was imaged, with what data this theme was supported by. So that has to be shown. So that is called coding process, okay? That is called coding. And we are doing coding, of course, without thinking of a particular pattern. Now you will find, okay, for research question number 2, it's about why. It's a why question. So if it is a why question, of course, answers should be the reasons for something. Okay, now reason number 1, 2, you have now identified randomly that are coming up from your data. When you have identified those themes, that's what you do first. So that is called free coding. You're freely coding. You don't think about a logical connection between the reasons that you identified, or whether you can group them, to some broader categories, and whether you can classify them into categories. And that is also should be supported by literature or your data collection itself. You cannot, group them randomly with as you prefer. Other than if you do not get that the theoretical support from your data or from the theory, if it does not talk such a classification, you will not be able to do that. But whether your data actually tell you about such a support or evidence for you to group them differently, that will be your second step. At the beginning, you will do free coding, right? Now, when you're doing free coding, of course, you're not worrying much about the next level, which is about organizing them and all. So that can be maybe done later on, right? So this is the first thing that you do. And the tree coding is, of course, once you have done free coding, if you can see that, okay, so this can be called, this can be the broader category or the concept that the question was about. It can be the main concept. Under that, you can see subcategories, okay? So therefore, it can be your parent node. So in our data analysis language, we call it the parent node, which is your broader concepts. And within it, of course, you'll be able to see some subcategories. And, so you can come up with such a structure when you can see a broader level of concepts, and when you can see certain, the next level of concepts that can be connected to the broader level. So you can do that as well. So that concept, of course, sometimes can be a parent node of your data analysis process. Okay, so these are actually called coding levels. So basically, at the very beginning, at once, you won't be able to see your tree coding structures or anything, but you can freely code, and later on, you can see whether your data is supporting any kind of such a classification. If so, you can do that. If not, you can leave it as it is as well. It is not a problem. So this particular process is therefore called coding levels, right? Yeah, I think I already told you what is all these things, because without this thing, I cannot, explain that particular diagram of a mouse and humans diagram. So we call it thematic analysis, and then you already know why why it can be called a thematic analysis, and what is coding, and all right now. Of course, coding now, when you take the software, a code is a space. You actually now, as you are creating a folder in your desktop, similarly, we are creating a folder in NVO, and then you give it a name. Now, when you have created a space, when you have created a folder, and when you have given it a name, it can be called a theme. Otherwise, it's just a code. Okay, when it is named, it becomes a theme. Right. And earlier, these codes, nodes, this node now here you saw parent node, child node. So you must be wondering why it is not called a code. Of course, earlier, like now, looking at this NVO software, right? Earlier versions had this name of nodes. But now usually we do not call it node, we call it a code. But this tree coding strategy is coming with nodes, with the word of nodes, parent nodes, child node, doesn't matter. It can be node or code, but it is just a space or a place, it's like a drawer that you have, that you're putting files into the drawer. And so something like that. Yeah. Finally, Ms. Pushpala, do I have enough time? About 5 to 10 more minutes?
Yeah, let's have it for 5 to 10 minutes, right? Yeah.
Right, okay. And so in the qualitative research process, specifically data analysis process, is very important to be documented and do it rigorously. The reason is, as I told you, this reliability, validity, right? Or we actually would like to have it as trustworthiness of data or quality of data in qualitative research. This was first raised by Lincoln and Buba. Because these terms are coming from quantitative paradigm. Usually we prefer to use, qualitative researchers are actually suggesting you not to use those two terms, better use trustworthiness or quality of data, right? Now in quantitative data, quantitative research, you have, reliability testing techniques like Cambridge alpha, even for, validity you have, because it's with numbers, you can run the technique, and by looking at the output, you can interpret, whether they are reliable or whether they are valid. So it is not possible with qualitative. But how we are going to do that in the qualitative research process is through your research process, okay? Because if the research process is correct, your data should also be consistent and valid. Now, looking at reliability is consistency, validity is the accuracy. So the consistency and accuracy, it is not the only way, using numbers is not the only way that you can assure consistency and accuracy. It can also be done through, it can also be get verified through the process. If you can prove that you have done it by going through the right process, so that when the process is correct, no one can argue about the outcome that you have obtained or achieved. So therefore, we are highly considering the process here. We are considering the process here. So that's why qualitative data research process must be very well documented. So when it comes to data analysis process also, how you have done data analysis must be clearly documented, because that is through what we are going to judge, or we are going to identify the trustworthiness or the quality of your data. Okay, right. Now, these are the 4 criteria commonly that we use, because they are the ones, as I told you, so they have been quite instrumental in bringing this into the literature. So this is what they have suggested: credibility, dependability, transferability, and confirmability. Now, if I will, quickly go through that. Now, when you take credibility, so if you, now, since you are very much familiar with validity and reliability terms, if I take the same word for you to, to understand it quite effectively, credibility can sometimes be identified as internal validities, internally within your research, how accurate they are, your data. Okay, this is about your data, credibility, how credible your data, it is about how accurate your data within your research, internal validity, right? Now we use triangulation, iteration, and reputation, replication logic. There can be many more, but I have selected these things to discuss with you. Now the triangulation is, Triangulation is a very important technique in qualitative research that will give you more, more benefits. Now you can see triangulation is here as well. For dependability also, you can use the same technique, which is triangulation. So triangulation is actually, triangulations are different types, but I will only talk about data triangulation here. To collect same data from different sources, right? Now, in qualitative research, we should not use only one data collection technique, right? If you do interviews, of course, it is not enough for like maybe for small research papers, it would be fine. But if you're doing like your MScs, your master's, MPhil, or your PhD, it does not enough. You'll have to go for more than one data collection technique because we want to ensure that we are getting the same data from all the ways, right? When I have interviewed, whatever they have told, I should be able to see it. Through observation also, I should be able to see the same practice, so the same scenario. Or through the document that I collected from that organization or, from your research setting, it should be supported. So when you can get that credibility, that's what it's called, credibility, from many sources, when the same thing is supported by many ways, we call it triangulation. Right. Iteration and refutation is, again, now you saw in this Miles and Hibben process, we went back and forth many times. Why? That was to ensure that what I have been doing, is the right thing. I have come to the right conclusion till I'm satisfied that I have done the right thing, that my data is right. So I went till that I don't see an issue with my findings when I compare it to the previous body of knowledge and everything. So you'll have to repeat it, have to go forward, backward. You can see, so this is a process like that. So that is called iteration and refutation. So you'll have to explain how many times you went back, how many times you went back to your original data when something was not clear, and also you'll have to explain that quite explicitly in your report. Right, replication logic is, as I told you, when you have a theme, now you can see a reason for something, but then when the same reason is appearing in other interviews, in other data collection sources as well, it will be verified, it will be confirmed. So that is called what is replication? Same thing should be repeated in many other places. That says, okay, so this is something that is existing. That's why many people have talked about the same thing. So that is replication logic. Okay, so you can propose it as a research finding because it's been replicated by many people. Dependability, again, reliability, I don't have to explain you. So you can depend your data. Consistency is coming from because they are consistent through many data sources. Reliability is about consistency. And the transferability is now when someone else is going through your research, whether they can also use if their research is also quite similar to my research, and if that is happening in a different research setting, for them to decide whether they can use my research findings, for that, I never know who will read my research, but what I can do for that is for them to decide whether that is good for them or not, whether that is relevant for them or not. What I have to do is I have to carefully describe everything that I have done. Okay, careful description referring to the content of data. What data, when and how, the nature of the interviews, and everything must be your data collection process, analysis process. Everything must be clearly stated. Why? Because it will help and some other person who is going through your research to decide whether this, how far this is credible for my research. So that is called thick description. So that is for external parties. That's what it's called, external validity, transferability. How can I transfer my findings to a similar setting? Therefore, that is called transferability. And the confirmability finally, which is about objectivity, whether your data is correct, objectivity, and whether they are coming from your own data. Right. So for that, you can do audit trails, is like to, send your findings once you have come to your thematic analysis, once you have concluded everything, you can send it back to your interviews to get it verified. This is what you wanted to mention, because I'm the one who have interpreted data, right? So then there can be certain issues with my interpretation process. The way that I have interpreted might be wrong. So for me to ensure that I have interpreted it correctly, whenever I'm not quite sure about anything, you can send it back to the original, the interviewee to get it verified. That is also acceptable. That is called audit trails. and standardize interview protocols, because when you're conducting interviews, you have to follow the same way of interviewing. Interview protocol is not just about the interview guide, but also the procedure that you have followed to interview the people. If you interview one person at the office, another person in a coffee shop, another person at the home, or someone in the morning, someone while they are driving, so that is not going to work, because that setting would affect on the quality of the information that they would provide. So I can keep on explaining much and more, but with the time limitation that we have, I think I'll stop from that point, Ms. Pushpamala.